How important is bipartisanship when you're making laws and decisions in the governmental capacity? In my opinion, it's not important at all. And this video goes out to Alex Ioannidis. You may remember him. He's been on a couple of my live streams. Very politically active guy. Politically active more so than I am because I think he's involved in a number of organizations. I'm pretty much just an independent. I focus more on ideas that I support and not so much on supporting an organization. There's a few individuals that I think are giving them consideration. I think President Trump, for example, I judge him based on more of his policies than on whether he's popular or not. And the same thing I like to say probably about Obama. I could say the same thing about a lot of the politicians that are active today, and about Colin Kaepernick. I could easily be one of these flag fanatics that condemn Colin Kaepernick for his protest. But I really chose in that case to analyze the situation and say, I think that he was doing a cynical thing and that his protest doesn't matter. And then it's a complete fraud. But can he protest? I think he can. I don't think there's a problem doing a protest, so to speak, on principle, even with his ridiculous statements with the pig socks and the Fidel Castro shirt and everything. He's allowed to do it. He's just a moron. But is he allowed to do it? Yes. But that's not the subject. That's actually a video coming up. This is not going to be very long, I hope. But it's on bipartisanship and on the Graham-Cassidy bill. Graham-Cassidy bill kind of didn't look very good. It's another one of those half-hearted gestures by the GOP trying to pretend that they're going to fix healthcare. The GOP can't fix healthcare if they're also in the bag for some of these insurance lobbyists. Although it looks like, based on some of the people that are opposing it, that maybe the insurance lobbyists aren't on board with with whatever it was called, the Graham-Cassidy bill. I think is its only name. I don't know if it has a different name. This is really one of the reasons that I continue to support the Rand Paul approach more, because it's not some fake Band-Aid that attempts to put a positive spin on a hopeless process of justifying corporate welfare. The Graham-Cassidy bill, I think one of its main thrusts was to do block grants to the states for both of their exchanges and for Medicare and Medicaid. I'm not saying that it wouldn't be a little better than what we have now. I'm just saying that ultimately it's an indicator that the GOP, as much power as it has right now, it really is the party of no ideas. They are a party that is guided by the interests of industries that are trying to influence the course of government legislation, the lobbyists, and it's not a party of the free market. If it was a party of the free market, we would have all of the ideas that were proposed during the election by both Trump and other candidates implemented, such as eliminating the state lines on the sale of insurance. And I think that it's very obvious that given their lack of action on that, we can see that they're not really serious about about initiating real healthcare reform of the type that we as free market supporters were proposing during the election. So why am I talking about bipartisanship? Well, Alex Ioannidis is one of the people that said, well, there's no reason why we should trash John McCain more than we trash Rand Paul, because ultimately they both oppose the legislation, and he also happened to oppose the legislation. Well, if you look at the reasoning behind both of those senators that opposed it, it's night and day. It's really there is no connection. Two people can oppose the same policy, for completely different reasons, and one can have a more valid reason, and one can have a reason that's more rooted in something that's let's say more privately important, or due to a grudge, whatever it may be. And that's really the reason that's going into the John McCain resistance on this healthcare legislation, any healthcare legislation. This is a person who's stated several times that he wants whatever system to come in to have bipartisan support. Whereas Rand Paul has been saying that you have to repeal it all to the root. You have to initiate a complete straight repeal of Obamacare. And then if there were to be a system to replace it, it has to start from a more free market perspective where choice and market variety is emphasized, and the consumer flexibility is emphasized. He emphasized a lot. There's a lot more the health savings accounts, HSAs. I happen to hold an HSA. I think that the Rand Paul objection is based on the actual content of the legislation, which is important. Now, is he going to get bipartisan support? Of course not. He's not even going to get partisan support, because the Republican Party is not ready to actually stand for any idea whatsoever. All they want to stand for is something that will satisfy the economic needs of the health insurance industry. And I'm not against the health insurance industry. I'm just saying that the interests of the consumer and the health insurance industry are not at all aligned. Okay, when you're talking about the customer versus the industry, no, they're not aligned. It's the same if you were to have the supermarket industry lobby for certain things like I mean, let's look at the corn growers. They argue for federal subsidies of corn for ethanol. Has that worked out for consumers? Absolutely not. It hasn't made gas cheaper by adding ethanol. None of those things has really led to any benefits. If anything, it's led to a glut in the market for corn, or should I say, a scarcity, the opposite of a glut. In some cases, corn is just a little higher of a price than needs to be. We can get into that at a different time. Yeah, corn subsidies, just like any other government intervention in the markets, it creates price fixing. It creates situations where the consumer is put at a disadvantage. Sometimes it's in order to protect a certain sector of the economy or people that are favored by the government and politicians. And in the case of the health insurance industry, it's much worse than the corn ethanol growers. Actually talking about people's lives and financial health, but both their physical and financial health is being affected by it. So I have here, it says that top doctor, hospital, and insurance groups released joint statement urging the Senate to reject the Graham-Cassidy bill. Let me see if I can share this. Yep. Here we go. A group of 6 major doctor, hospital, and insurance groups released a joint statement on Saturday condemning the latest GOP effort to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, urging the Senate to reject the Graham-Cassidy bill. And then they talk about how they all have these the Heller-Johnson bill does not move us closer to that goal. The Senate should reject it. They're talking about high quality care and affordable coverage for all. The groups that issued the statement included the American Medical Association, American Academy of Family Physicians, American Hospital Association, Federation of American Hospitals, America's Health Insurance Plans, and the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association. And then it says that, and I'm not saying that the bill was good. I'm just saying that none of these groups actually wants to initiate anything. All they want to do is try to torpedo any real change. Some of them were on board with Obamacare. Why were they on board with Obamacare? Because in the end, Obamacare did not end their capacity to screw the customer. In the end, it was kept in the hands of private insurers, the insurance market. That's why it's a betrayal for progressives. Okay, the fact of the matter is that the Obamacare was a huge, a giveaway to the insurance companies by Barack Obama. He was stabbed the progressives in the back by not supporting single-payer universal health care. That's really on him in terms of his relationship with them. For us, however, it also screwed us. The free market capitalists, people that believe that the market should be able to decide the price of health insurance. Instead, you now have state boards, insurance commissioners, determining how much these premiums are going to hike. It said as of Friday, the future of the Graham-Cassidy bill looked dismal after Republican Senator John McCain announced he intended to vote against the bill. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, a fellow Republican, had already come out strongly against it, as had Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine. As Republicans control 52 seats in the Senate, they would have to persuade at least one of those three senators to vote for the bill in order to pass it with a simple majority under the budget reconciliation process. The GOP must pass the bill by September 30th, otherwise it will be subject to the Senate's usual 60-vote threshold. But some, including President Trump, have speculated that Paul or Collins could still change their minds before the bill comes to vote. I know Rand Paul, and I think he may find a way to get there for the good of the party, Trump tweeted on Saturday. That's actually, I'm going to have to disagree with Donald Trump. I think that in this case, why would you want to support a political party where you're in the same? I mean, Rand Paul, to be honest with you, he needs to leave the Republican Party for the good of himself and for the good of those of us that support him. Because he's in the same party as a person like John McCain that claims that he's a spy for Russia. He's in the same party as people like Graham and McCain that are always trying to get us into wars overseas. And he's in the same party as people like Bob Corker that are, they approved the Iran nuclear deal that sent billions of dollars to Iran for nothing. And essentially, so those are not healthcare related topics, but you see that there's a huge gulf in terms of what these people support, whereas Rand Paul supports a more free market, straight capitalistic approach to healthcare, where you would allow, for example, eliminate a lot of the regulations, including the state lines and everything that keeps health insurance very much like so regulated and price fixed that it's really difficult to see how it is capitalistic. It's more like a system where the more powerful of a company you are, the more access you have. You're able to go in and be at an advantage. It's harder for the small companies to really compete because you have all these regulators in every single state. You go from Kansas to Missouri, deal with two different regulators. You have to basically put up a whole different menu of plans up there. It's just not worth the effort for small insurers to deal with health insurance, so they don't. And that's why we have a dearth of insurance choices in many of these states, and it got much worse under Obamacare, a lot worse, because under Obamacare the price fixing and which we're about to get to just became prohibitive for many of these companies to function. That's why they pull out of Obamacare, and in many cases these exchanges went belly up. But if you're like some of these mainstream GOPers, like the guy I'm talking to, Alex, nice good guy, but he doesn't have an actual position. His actual position is bullshit, which is that everybody deserves, like was said earlier in the article, affordable health and high quality health care. Well, how are you supposed to do that? You don't have an idea for that, do you? You really don't. And for people like John McCain, that's the difference between him and Rand Paul. I've already explained that what Rand Paul's position is. What is John McCain's position? He wants a bipartisan bill. Well, what is a bipartisan bill? A bipartisan bill could be anything. A bipartisan bill, which is what John McCain wants, means absolutely nothing. It could mean the best bill in the world, and it could mean just a piece of crap, and it could mean something that's completely meaningless. What's a bipartisan bill like? Imagine if you came late to dinner with a group of people, and you just sat down at the table, and the waiter comes up to you and they say, "Well, what do you want to eat?" And you're like, "Well, I'll just have what everybody else ordered." If you see people were eating, well, what if they ordered shrimp and you have a seafood allergy? Is that the right decision? Because you agreed with the whole? No, it's a horrible decision. And that's when you're just referring to yourself. Now, in John McCain's case, he's telling the American people and the people of Arizona that elected him that essentially the actual content of a bill that's put forward doesn't matter. And I'm not saying that I agree with the Graham-Cassidy bill. There's probably, and I'll tell you in a second why I think there could be some advantages to it, but I'm still not going to say that I support it. He's essentially saying it doesn't really matter what the content of the bill is so much as if it has bipartisan support, so that even if there is a proposal that I know will screw the entire state of Arizona by jacking the premiums up, as has happened in the past, as happened in 2016 to 17, when Obamacare premiums in some cases went up by 96% in Arizona. And I used to share that on my Facebook a lot more, but that's what happened that year. And this is for some plans. I'm not going to say all plans. There's never a uniform hike across all the plans, but there are always certain plans that go up more than others. He's basically saying, well, it doesn't matter if the plan is going to be less affordable or more affordable, so long as it's bipartisan. Well, in that case, bipartisanship really doesn't mean anything. That bipartisanship, by the way, is what's gotten us to where we are on many issues that really show that our country is on autopilot in some cases, and in the hands of people that don't have our best interests in mind. Last week, Rand Paul had the speech where he talked about the authorization on use of military force, where he opposed it, and he wanted the Senate to bring it up for a vote, whether they would approve the use of military force in Afghanistan and Yemen and all those places. And the rest of the Senate wouldn't, but they wouldn't even touch it. Nobody wanted to vote for it. I don't even think Bernie Sanders might have supported it. But ultimately, we're seeing that there's bipartisan support for foreign wars where the average American doesn't really have any input. We're in foreign conflicts that, to be honest with you, most Americans could give a shit about. They don't have any perspective on them. Do you think that these GOP senators are really giving the American people the full 411 on whether we're supposed to be in Yemen or not? Do you think Donald Trump is? I mean, let's be honest. I'm not a person who's an opponent of Donald Trump per se, but I think he's being disingenuous here. You have to go to the American people and say, this is why we are in Yemen, and this is our strategy going forward and how we are going to win. And he hasn't done it. And he should. Okay, so if you're a Donald Trump supporter, he owes you that, at least to come to you and say, well, we are in Yemen. This is my position. I think we should stay in Yemen. And this is how I think that we should proceed in order to win the war. But he hasn't been doing it. So don't you think that he owes that to you? I think he does. I think that we have to keep our politicians accountable. It can't just be these idiots that show up in public squares and wear pussy hats that give the criticism of the president or these senators or whatever. If we're going to be a civically conscious country, then people with real ideas and real opinions have to speak up as well. And that's not what John McCain does. What John McCain does is he comes out and says, well, the only people supporting this bill are people that are on my side of the aisle. Therefore, the idea must be bad. Well, that's not true. That's not true at all. I have this stupid Skype for Business screen popping up here. Let me just get out of it. I can't believe that it's almost impossible to I mean, it's impossible to uninstall Skype for Business, by the way. Don't download it. It's just a waste of time. Let's see if I can exit it. At least, yeah, there won't be any more pop-ups. But sorry for that little issues. But yeah, the John McCain book on bipartisanship, it really just shows that politics is meaningless if you only put it along party lines. Okay, so does that mean that if a bill is supported by only one party, that's a good thing? Absolutely not. But you cannot, then therefore, what he's saying is that the only flaw in Obamacare, is that it was only supported by Democrats. And by the way, it wasn't supported by all the Democrats. There were plenty of Democrats in the House that voted against it. Okay, there were plenty of Democrats who said this is not a good idea. We're going to vote against it for whatever reasons they were. I think some of them wanted, they didn't want, they did want universal health care. So they were like, this doesn't go far enough. And some of them were like, no, this is a plan that's going to, it's a house of cards. It's going to fall all over itself and die. So there were Democrats that opposed it. So Obamacare, what he thinks was the essential sin in it was that it was only supported by Democrats. That's not true. If you really look at it, the model itself was a failure. It doesn't work that way. The principle that if an idea is only supported by one side, that makes it bad, is ridiculous. Getting into the Iraq War was a bipartisan initiative. The what's it called? The McCain-Feingold political financing bill, the one that it was the biggest campaign finance reform bill in the past 20, 30 years. That was a bipartisan effort. It was John McCain and Russ Feingold of Wisconsin. Has that solved the issue of campaign finance reform? No. It's made it worse in some cases because of the super PACs. It's made it worse in many respects. This bipartisan bill, which at the time was heralded as one of the greatest bipartisan pieces of legislation in history, has literally accomplished nothing. And Obamacare, let me tell you something. In New Mexico, fuck these pop-ups. It says insurance rate hike set record for New Mexico exchange. This is the Albuquerque Journal, Albuquerque Journal, from Thursday. It says it looks like Obamacare premiums for New Mexico policyholders will spike by double digits in 2018. Here, let me share this with you guys. I think you guys can see it now. Regulators have approved the largest health insurance premium increase in the 4-year history of New Mexico's subsidized exchange, State Insurance Superintendent John Franchini said. Average premium increases for 2018 will range from 36 to 41% for mid-level insurance coverage, according to an analysis by his office. The state's top insurance regulators said the rate increases in 2018 are heavily influenced by uncertainty about whether the federal government will block or discontinue payments to insurers. President Donald Trump has repeatedly threatened to halt these reimbursements to insurance companies in his drive to dismantle the Affordable Care Act, as Obamacare is formally known. About 55,000 New Mexico residents sign up each year for insurance through the state's exchange known as Be Well NM. Back in the marketplace for 2018 are Molina Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Mexico, Christus Health Plan, and New Mexico Health Connections, the same as this year. Between them, the providers are offering 216 individual plans in the new enrollment year. This year, there were 179 individual plans on offer. So let me look up New Mexico. It's only take a second. So hold on. There's 55,000 people in New Mexico on Obamacare plans. That's out of a population of 2 million. So that's less than, let's do the math here. I think that's less than 0.5% of the population. Okay? It might be, yeah. Anyway, there's this whole problem right now in the United States where people are thinking that Obamacare is this widespread system where so many people are participating and that it's essential and that it's become inevitable that it will continue and we should just accept it. Don't believe it. Obamacare is basically kept on life support by the individual mandate, which requires people to buy health insurance. I think to some degree that's been rescinded. And many of the people that buy Obamacare plans have been doing so in order to avoid paying a penalty. Once you repeal a lot of those provisions, many of those people simply won't buy the plans, or they'll go and they'll buy one of these other alternatives like an HSA. I think if we did more to move people to the HSAs or other alternatives, Obamacare would pretty much shrivel up and die anyway. The problem is that we don't have an honest discourse about health insurance at all today, and there's plenty that I don't understand. I'm not going to claim that we have a system that's simple to understand, even for people that are uninitiated. But when you have, it says here, 40% of the people in New Mexico aren't even eligible for subsidies. Okay. And said earlier, 36 to 41% rate increases. So it doesn't matter whether you are getting a subsidies or not, you're still going to, the hell? Oh, monoslab. Sorry, I was distracted by this ad. It doesn't matter what you're paying, you're going to be paying more, whether you're getting a subsidy or not. And if you were to not be paying more, that means that the government would be fronting more money to the insurance company to subsidize it. And what these politicians are doing is very simple. When they try to say, President Trump is being mean about Obamacare and he's blackmailing us and whatever, and they're blaming the rate hikes on him. They're basically saying that these cost share reductions, which are these subsidies that the government is collecting in order to pay to insurance companies to keep the premiums down, they're saying, without those, Obamacare would implode. They just won't admit it. They're trying to say that the government owes these insurance companies your money. Basically, when the government takes funds from its treasury in order to pay for anything, they have to ask you for permission. Now, last year, if I'm not mistaken, people voted, putatively against Obamacare. They were saying we want Obamacare to be repealed and replaced. In some cases, like me, we're saying just repeal it. Don't even replace it. Well, so long as these cost share reductions are going on, they are robbing the American people of funds that are basically ill-gotten gains for the insurance company. They're saying, well, in order to prop up a system that people don't support anyway, we're going to continue taking money from taxpayers and give them to insurance companies to provide more expensive health insurance. And those that will say, we need to keep the costs down. How come the insurance was going up in past years anyway? That had nothing to do with Donald Trump. You can criticize Donald Trump for everything that's going on right now, but the fact is that this follows a pattern that's been going on since Obamacare started, where the system is simply unsustainable. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. Does he have a better plan? No. Is he the answer to the health insurance crisis? Is Donald Trump the answer to the health insurance crisis? No. But to blame all of these problems on a guy who was elected in January and has been willing to work with Congress in order to repeal and replace Obamacare is ludicrous. The person whose fault this is Bitch McConnell, and John McCain. Those people, they've made this country into a joke. We have literally nothing gained since last year. And to be honest with you, I think that going forward, apparently in the other article, in the Business Insider article, it said that by September 30th, if nothing is actually accomplished, and you know, Rand Paul doesn't buy into this plan, which I don't think he will, then you're going to have a requirement for 60 votes in order to pass anything. Well, I think then it becomes a little more likely that Donald Trump uses his nuclear option and simply drops the suit where the executive branch was suing Congress in order to get the cost share reductions a couple years ago. Okay, so then that means that Obamacare basically falls apart unless Congress breathes new life into it by authorizing the cost share reductions. Then it falls entirely into the lap of the Republican Party, not Donald Trump, the Republican Party, because they would be the ones keeping Obamacare on life support, which they're doing. It would just be more formal. So I think we should pay attention to that. If he were to do that, I'm not sure that the Republican Party would prop up Obamacare. I think in some cases, you know, Paul Ryan and I think Paul Ryan would have to do it. He's already on slippery. He's on the slippery slope now to being primaried away by Paul Nehlen, who's his rival in his congressional district. He's really on thin ice. So we'll see what happens. That's it for today. This is Ramon, Bold Like a Leopard. This is ACA Today, the segment I do on Obamacare. Has been a long time coming. But yeah, give me your ideas. Let me know what you think is the right path forward for healthcare. Let me see if there's anything in the chat before I leave. It's probably Angel just trolling me. Dean Kruger. Oh, here we go. Hey, Dean. We might have to wait until 2018 to get rid of Obamacare. If we wait, we might get something better. I trust Ron Paul 10 times more than McCain. Listen, I trust, in some ways, Chuck Schumer 10 times more than John McCain. Dean Kruger says ethanol is actually bad for your engine. It burns hotter and burns up the gaskets. Then he says it would be complete crap. I'm not sure what he was talking about. Were they bipartisan when they gave us Obamacare? Hell no, they weren't. Yeah, exactly what I was saying. Dean says meta share plans seem to be. Yeah, I've heard about that. MetaShare. I've been hearing a lot of good things about them. I've been hearing about them on the radio too, but it sounds a lot like just good marketing to me. So I really have to hear from somebody about that. But yeah, thanks, Dean, for tuning in. I saw somebody else popped in for a second, but yeah, this is just me, and I'm responding to somebody I was talking to, Alex. And yeah, let me know what you think. Do you have a reaction? And maybe if somebody's watching later, tell me, do you think that John McCain has a point? I really don't see a point in anything he's saying. Have a great night, everybody, and beautiful Sunday.